Hey, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank. Today we have two major things we're going to be discussing. First off is the X-Men 97 review. That is going to be me and Thomas digging into the first 3 episodes of X-Men 97. Shout out to Thomas. He has read essentially every 90s X-Men comic book, and he's like closing in on present day. There is no way I would have that much focus to do that. So shout out to Thomas. He will be a valuable asset going forward, because every week we're going to be reviewing X-Men 97 on our YouTube channel. So we have the first 3 episodes that we're reviewing on this episode, and then you can follow up with us every week on our YouTube channel. Join us over there. Then we're going to have an interview with Bill Bernhardt. He is the writer of a brand new book called The Superman Wars. What a special book. This is all about the battle for the rights to Superman. If you didn't know, Superman was actually created by writer Jerry Siegel and artist Joe Shuster. So Bill takes the narrative approach of following Jerry and through his life while he goes through court cases and the amount of loss and just hardship put on him by DC. But then it ends with triumph. It's a fantastic story, and it's, all based on facts, and it's really well done by Bill. So make sure you tune in and check that out as well. That's going to be the second half of this episode. So join us as we dig into some X-Men and some Superman. I mean, what a great episode right there. Talking X-Men 97 season 2. We're talking about those first 3 episodes. Let's go. Thomas, what do you think about those first 3 episodes?
Dude, I was like you, our old man bodies said no, but our hearts said yes. And I was like, yeah. I'm staying up and watching this thing, at least one episode. And I was blown away, because I tried to read these comics going into this, and I'm like, none of this makes sense. This is like the craziest idea ever. I don't know how they're going to turn it into an episode, and then I liked the episode. So applause, applause, applause.
I will be farming you for comic book references here in a bit. I on my side, I just enjoyed the heck out of it. I really like the idea of them using 3 different timelines. Man, when we got that X-Force intro for the second one, I was, hell yeah, brother. Take me back to the 90s today. But overall, I had a bunch of the action. I mean, Jubilee looks so cool. A character I never would have thought would look cool. Looked great. So there was a lot of really big highlights, and I think it boiled down to me, like, I kept coming back to, like, man, they really set up and I reference back to X-Men comics in general, so many moral dilemmas where it's like, I don't know what's right. Good. Then you're reading it right, And there's a lot of that going on in this episode. Yeah.
So true. I think that's another thing now, as I've matured, as we mature with our books, as I've matured and like read, to this day, I think the best comic book run I've ever read is House and Powers of X. I was literally like running into the bedroom and like trying to explain this whole story to Christina. It was like at the end of Midsommar, it was like, wait, but then this, and like, what does this mean? And like, the imagery and all this stuff. And something about the way they can set up an X-Men story so that it just seems like impossible situations where it's kind of a lose-lose and it's kind of a win-win. It just feels like such a mature story, and they continue it here. And and how are they going to deal with the fact that they let Nathan go and now he's back? And Mother Askani, which is like the craziest, silliest like concept of like a person from a different timeline, now the head of a future timeline. And that, I was like, how the fuck are they going to do this? Sorry, I apologize for the French, but we're mature adults here.
We're mature readers around here. So let's start off with Mother Askani, because that is, so we're going to start with that first one, which is Days of Past Future, which my brain was like, that's not how the words go. As I've seen the title.
Am I dyslexic?
Yeah, right. Confirmation. Damn, TikTok was right. And so TikTok will tell you your ADHD so fast, it's crazy. Maybe it's just mine. I don't know.
No, I've been double diagnosed, and it's by me and mainly me twice, and then a doctor, so triple diagnosed, I guess.
But in that episode, I really liked the idea of Scott and Jean wanting to be with their son Nathan, and there's like it's like a chance. But while I'm watching this, I'm just like, there is no way in hell this could work, and you just know eventually they got to sacrifice this relationship, man. It just really sucks.
Yeah, I think what I'm coming to from these first 3 episodes, and we'll stick with the first episode, but how
Mhm.
quickly they kind of fix that situation, because it's a 4 episode, not 4 episode, it's a 4 issue run of comics.
Yeah.
The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, I think. And there's a lot of back and forth, and it makes sense, like because there's a lot of other issues that go on in there where it's like Scott feels bad for giving up his son. And, how does Jean process the fact that Scott had a baby with a clone,
Yeah.
but like she still knows and remembers everything the clone did? So, like, does it feel like her kid? Does it feel like the clone's kid? Like, how does that whole situation work? And I think they do a really good job in this episode of showing that no, Gene still feels a ton of ownership for Nathan and still feels
Yeah.
like, no, this is my son and like we're a family. And they kind of hinted at it last season when it's the episode where they go to Bastion's mother's house and they get ambushed by the living sentinels.
Mhm.
And then they have that whole don't mess with don't screw with the Summers family or whatever he says in the
Yeah, yeah,
Porsche,
yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah.
that's cool. But how does she actually feel about him as a kid? I think they nailed it in this episode, and I think that alone for me was like, oh, they're doing a good job with like making this super convoluted story still have some emotion, still making it pretty clear.
Kind of putting it to bed really because in the last season there was a moment where I think she was talking to Storm on the bed, and Storm was like, "You feel though the birth, you feel all that, so it is still you." And then I think like
Mhm.
that's words, here's actions, and in this episode was all about actions and her acting like a mother to a young
Ooh, I
Nathan,
like that.
and yeah, so I think they had set that to bed, and I think we also had a Nathan go from like unsure about himself if he can be a leader, a hunter of apocalypse, and then by the end of the episode, we're like, oh no, this kid will. Yeah, or even at the end of the 3 episodes, he has embraced his future. He's taken in that like the AI system or whatever, and so he's like ready to go. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I love that too because we always hear about, Nathan had a tough childhood and,
Mhm.
he grew up in these tough times. And you get a brief, like, if for anybody who hasn't seen X-Men, the animated series, right? If it was like, if you read the comics, you kind of know a little bit more about Cable, but his backstory too. Don't even get me started on Psylocke yet, because Psylocke
yeah.
it just has the messiest story ever. And like, I was like, how the hell are they going to do this? But his story is messy too. I think that Deadpool kind of like cleaned it up a little bit, made it a little bit more manageable. And then
Okay.
now we're getting into like, what do the comics say and how would you adapt that? And from here, you're like, oh, okay. I thought they just did a phenomenal job because it's so, again, so messy. It's so confusing. It's like the 90s had all these different writers and they were like, we got to save the comic book industry and like throw everything at it. And this guy should have
Yeah.
shoulder pads and big guns, and a lot of pockets, give him pockets everywhere.
More
But
pockets. Yeah.
you know,
Onslaught is like the most '90s villain in the world, and he's like,
for
"That's coming."
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. But yes, absolutely. Which I think there's hints to Onslaught. So that's another thing we can save that at the end. But I think maybe
Yeah.
Onslaught could be a future thing. But I just think that they wrapped it up really, really nice. I think they wrapped up the whole Ascani of it all, Mother Ascani
Mhm.
being Rachel Summers, the Days of Future Past daughter
Well, they didn't
from
mention Rachel
yeah.
Summers, though, I thought was odd. I thought for sure they were gonna have a moment where they talk about that, but they really kinda left her as a mystery bag, I thought.
Yes, yeah, that's true. That's true. I felt rewarded as an X-Men comic book fan because you know who
Right.
she is. And I but also the whole Ascani clan, if you've ever like tried to read into that, which I did a little bit, I was like, what in the hell is this? Like, what does this even mean? Who is this? Like, who is Mother Ascani? Why do they care about this? Long story short, as far as I can tell, the Ascani clan were a far future sect of mutants who are still trying to fight apocalypse based off the morals of the X-Men. And so that's it, like in a
I
nutshell,
see.
as far as I could. And they all have their own powers, and it's all new characters and all this stuff, and it's super far in the future. I was like, this is super messy. How are they going to do this? I thought it was clean in the episode.
Basically future X-Men. Um, let's and then I
Yeah.
think this is the one that we had Storm with, right? Storm was in this one?
Mhm.
Or was she in okay.
Yeah.
I really like Storm, like, the upgrade because the idea that she's a goddess has always just been like, "That's really cool." But then when, like, Forge is like, "My goddess," or whatever he says, and she's actually, like, using the
Yeah.
solar storms, I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty god tier right there. That's sick as hell." That was such a good moment too.
Yeah. Hot take for anybody who read the comics in the 90s. Like that relationship didn't really like it didn't really make sense to me back in the day. I was like, I don't see it.
Right.
I don't see how they could be in a relationship, whatever. After seeing what happened last season and even more in this episode, I'm like, power couple. Love this
Hell yeah.
couple. They're freaking the shit. Like I love how he just supports her. He's not intimidated by her, but also like you could do more. You know, Scott like Mother Askani kind of says like you can do more than you even think you can do. And it's like how more badass can you be than controlling the weather? But they level her up, and it's like this
Yeah.
is sick. So yeah, that was awesome
And
call
the,
out.
the editing on that scene too, when she's actually like, pulling from the sun or whatever, like it just very felt it felt very much like she was reaching inward to reach outward. Like it was a really good power up. They did a great
Mm,
job with the editing, and the animation has always been top notch on the show. What am I saying? Any
yeah,
other call outs
yeah.
before we move on to the next episode, by the way?
Just more. I think it's I think it's cool how they keep finding ways uh, listen. For anybody out there who played Marvel Ultimate Alliance, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about synergy attacks. This
Hmm.
show, this show is doing an incredible job with synergy attacks from the way that Jean even uses the force fields and then like Scott is shooting out of them and then steps out
Yeah.
and then is able to like kind of go back in. Like little
Yeah.
details like that. I was like, fire. Like,
Hmm.
man, that is so cool. I love how they're doing it. I love even Scott and Jean's relationship because it's been on the fence, especially last season. It was like really tricky and it's like, wait, are you cheating on me with Madeline? And
Yeah.
but they just feel so united. And I saw a post on Reddit where it was like, who is Marvel's first family? Like the family where you're like, that's like the epitome of like a good family in Marvel. And
Yeah.
it was a bunch of different families. I think Magneto's was in there. I think I don't know, I had a bunch of random ones, but the Summers were the first one. And I gotta admit, after I don't even know, hundreds of X-Men comics that I've read, I think they're probably the best depiction. Granted, there's so many messy things in there of like a solid family. They always come back to each other. They always got each other's backs. Even in the new run with Scott and Jean, like even though she's a million miles away being the Phoenix, he's always looking for her. He always wants her. She's always thinking about him. He grounds her, and I guess she kind of grounds him in this like you can't carry the weight of the world, even though I know that
Yeah.
to you, you don't have to do it yourself. And I get that from man, that sounds like a lot, but I get it from this episode.
You're right, and as long as we keep getting stuff like that from every episode, that's just why the show does so well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then I like how like Wolverine's just the weird dude that sleeps over sometimes in their family.
Yeah. I
Logan's sleeping over tonight. It's weird. Yeah, he's got
I
a room over there. Don't worry about it.
yeah, and he
That's
just
funny.
like brushes the picture of both of them sometimes
Yeah,
on his bed.
on his bed. All right, episode 2, a force to be reckoned with. I thought this was the weakest of the episodes, although that intro again with X Force was like insane. But
Wow.
Jubilee really stepped up. Sunspot looks cool. Embraced a new look. Really, Psylocke. Oh man, more Psylocke every day of the week. I'm cool with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Archangel. It's nice to see Archangel. I especially like Archangel because he's that post Four Horsemen thing, and so when he's
I
post Four
love it.
Horsemen, I really love that on him. And
Yeah.
then Cable just being Cable. Like it's cool to see. So to me, the moral dilemma out of this one. Let me start with this. The moral dilemma out
Mhm.
of this one I pulled from was Cable grew up without Xavier, and Jubilee grew up with Xavier. So Jubilee works with Xavier's limitations on what the morality of doing good looks like, and Cable's all about like the ends justify the means. And seeing those two formats hit against each other was very interesting. And like, is Jubilee still Jubilee if she goes beyond those limitations, or does she lose herself? And so I thought they did a really good job of kind of reminding us of what Xavier instills in these X Men and why sometimes that team surpasses all other X teams and everything else.
Ooh, I like that. Because you're right. I think that even works when you talk about Polaris, who's a big part of that episode too.
Oh yeah, that's
And
right.
we
Yeah.
saw it in the original series. She's part of X Factor, I believe. And that's the
Mhm.
episode where Iceman comes into play. And now we have X Factor again with like Havoc and Wolfbane and Strong Guy and Multiple Man. But you see that Jubilee is able to cut past the government exterior of Polaris because she's able to speak to her as Charles would speak to Jubilee. And
Well
I,
said.
I I agree. I like it. I think that they've done such an incredible job with Jubilee's character. Um, Hot take, people are gonna hate me for it. I think it was a little bit too much. It was going into like Zack Snyder territory where it was like, okay, I get it. She's a badass. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. I mean, I love that they're boosting up her character, and I think it's cool. But as far as the episode goes, I wanted to see maybe Sunspot come in there and do a little bit more, or more X Factor. But you said something about another character. So weirdly, now everybody's a Cyclops fan. So if I say that, people are like, "Oh, whatever, everybody loves him." It's like, no, they didn't. When I was growing up, nobody liked Cyclops. I was like one of the only people I
Right.
knew that liked Cyclops. But I've always been an Angel fan,
Hmm.
and I've always liked Warren. I've always thought it was really interesting how, so badly, before we got Mystique, he was the stand-in of like, you can't hide what you look like, but also
Right.
like he's really wealthy. And that this type of, if you want to call it disability or difference or whatever, didn't stop this guy whose parents were so wealthy, but it ostracized him from normal people, right? And
Right,
something
and it
about
was
that
like his parents accepting him, which we see a little bit with Sunspot. I think they're using Sunspot for that story for the most part in the wider scheme of
totally.
things. But it was originally Angel that was like, well,
Yeah.
you're not going to fit in on the golf course, kind of thing.
Yeah. The country club's not going to let you in with those giant
Yeah,
wings.
take the cure, kid. Yeah,
Yeah, so true. But then, I felt like after the apocalypse, Four Horsemen of it all, he just became this one note bad guy. I'm messed up, whatever. So I
right.
love how it's kind of come back around to he's like trying to do good, but he's got a little bit more of an edge. And for me, that's the most interesting Warren, where I don't care what people look at, how people see me. I don't care about how people view me. Like, I want to
Mhm.
make sure bad stuff doesn't happen anymore. So much to
Yeah,
the point where they're like, Cable's like, hey, kill War. Like, you got it. And he's like,
yeah.
no hesitation, which to me is a very fascinating look at Angel that I don't feel like is explored a lot, especially like in movies or TV.
Let me tap into that a little bit more because Angel, above all people, knows what it's like to be under the weight of Apocalypse's control. And
Mhm,
so when he's told that, he first off he sees that as a mercy. But secondly, like an order from a big strong guy, yeah, I'll take that. That's what I'm used to. And so
mhm.
Cable kind of being like knows that he can command
Ooh,
that kill, and that's something that he's already familiar with. Knows that Archangel's good at that. And also, I think Archangel has this kind of like what makes the character more interesting to me is like he was just this altruistic, really good guy, X-Men, one of
mhm,
the like, old school ones, then
mhm.
goes deep into darkness. And on the way back, that darkness didn't leave him. He's just constantly trying to fight it now. And I
Mhm.
think that darkness is always there. So it's like, how much do you tap into that to be the badass you are today now? So I think like in that moment, like, will he ever regret just like quickly killing War like that? Maybe. It's
Right.
out there now.
Yeah, it is. I think it's an interesting place they can take the character, and I was like, it's cool, it's cool not to just see him be like goody two shoes from before, and then I mean he
Yeah.
was kind of like a smart ass back in the day, but like he was kind of like Iceman in the early 90s, but
Yes,
and
yes.
then also like messed up from Apocalypse. Yeah, and you know what? You know who I want to see interact th- because they've both been kind of controlled and manipulated, is I want to see Morph have a conversation with Archangel, like two people who were like
Oh, that's
broken
a good idea.
down,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I hope at some point this season we get a conversation between them, because there are two, good guys that got captured by bad guys and then like, messed up. So I want to see what
I'll throw
that looks
Rogue in that
like.
batch too, because I feel like Rogue is
Ooh,
constantly teetering on just siding with Magneto every time.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's something there too. It's
for sure.
side note. How how neat is it or weird is it when you like have talked to AJ or talked to Lenore and now they're playing their characters on screen. You're like, I know that person, and it's just like
Yeah.
hearing Rogue's voice. So it's just being like, I now pictures Lenore so much. It's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. It does mess me up for a second, but then
Yeah,
but
yeah,
then, I feel like I really just settle into the character, and
yeah.
I think that speaks to the writing. I think it speaks to, actually, let's talk about this because I'm curious. How do you feel about Wolverine? I love Wolverine. I think the
Yeah.
dialogue is so perfectly Wolverine. Um, but I don't know. I feel like I notice the voice actor a little bit too much now.
I don't think so. I thought he.
No?
I don't think they did enough Wolverine, frankly. So I didn't really notice him. Did you have a problem with it yourself?
No, I didn't have a problem with it. It's just like I notice Cal Dodd. Like I
Yeah.
hear Cal Dodd and then when you watch the original, this is how much of a geek I am. When you go back and watch the original animated series and his voice now, you can tell like it's changed a little bit, you know?
The
And
original
I
one had
think
like
that
more gruff in it. I think it was like you could feel like the
right.
smoking or something. Something was in there. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I just don't think we had enough Wolverine. Frankly, that was my big complaint. I'm like, you got feral Wolverine here, and you're not gonna do more with him. Come on now, guys. The way he's
Right.
like breaking the bones,
The breaking
sick.
the bone, so sick. Well, like, okay, so that was the era of Wolverine that I got introduced to him, and I was
Hmm.
like, I never understood why. Like, we didn't have Google, right? So I couldn't Google like,
Yeah.
why does Wolverine have wood bones? So I would have to like go to Barnes and Noble and like find an encyclopedia, and
Mm.
yeah, and then like something about that, I always love the bones more than I love the metal. I even to this
Wow.
day, I think I do still because the idea that he just has these, bones growing inside him and shoots out, and then they took that and were like, let's make them knives. Was just like
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, yeah. I wish they did go a little bit more feral with him though.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, maybe we'll get more of him on the next episode. I'm so ready for that. But James messaging me is like, uh, I love this show. Only complaint, 30 minutes is way too freaking short. I'm like, amen,
Too
brother. I
short.
am fully on board with that.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's way too short. Yeah, did we
Let's
did we talk enough about Psylocke? Like, I'm curious.
no, we
They
didn't.
didn't
We didn't
go
talk enough
deep
about
into her.
anybody, but also we're trying to keep this thing moving, so it's hard. But yeah,
Yeah, it's
Psylocke is
true, it's true.
incredible.
Yeah. Any thoughts on it? Like, I feel like what a time for Psylocke as a character between Marvel
Oh yeah.
Rivals and her being a big part of this show now. I'm like, man,
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm just stoked. I
I
just think
I
it's like amazing.
yeah, and I'm happy people are starting to realize how strong she is. Like she is, I
Mhm,
think, the heavy hitter of X Force. I think outside
mhm.
of Cable, she's the carrier of them. And there were so many times, like even like when she was
Definitely.
like halfway knocked out, she's like mind control or whatever. I think that people are starting to realize, like, she's one of those characters. Like, can she just be on the X Men now already? So yeah, I think she's great.
Right. I think they will, yeah, it seems like they would probably do that then, right? Which I hope so. But yeah, I mean, in the new comic runs, she's like up there with Quentin Quire where they're like tapping into people's minds to like break their mind, to find
Yeah.
information and stuff. So she's a really powerful telepath. And it kind of also comes out with that cool, like pinkish purple energy, which is so
Yeah.
unique. It's
I
awesome.
always love when like somebody's not sure of something and you see like the pink butterflies flying by. It's like, oh, they're screwed. The
Yeah,
little
yeah.
pink butterfly is such a good way of signing like you are on the wrong side of this fight, buddy. So that's a good one.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll get into like the rest of the MCU here pretty soon. That'd be nice. That'd be cool.
Hmm. Definitely.
Let's go ahead to episode 3, Rise of Apocalypse Part 1. So we're gonna get the second part. This was my favorite episode just because I'm a sucker for the past, a sucker for Egypt, and
Me
I really
too.
enjoyed uh like kind of just questioning Magneto because I was like, Magneto, what is your purpose in helping out Apocalypse? Are
Mm,
you helping him because he's a mutant and you are just so ironclad? I gotta help all mutants. Even when you try to evolve past it, you're like, I can't help it. This guy's outnumbered by everybody at this point.
right.
Or are you learning from Xavier because Xavier would take a broken mutant and better them? So are you trying
Mhm.
to create an Apocalypse that's not a bad guy? Which it's like that's admirable. You're not going to do well at it, but that's admirable, and I appreciate that. So
Mhm.
I was really hoping to kind of get some answers into this, and then of course eventually Apocalypse is like, "You guys betrayed me," and starts attacking him. Like, well, everything blows up. That's too bad.
Yeah, it was all a matter of time. There's that moment though where the chief guy of Apocalypse, where he says, "Oh, go soft on them" or whatever, and he's like, "Go soft on them," and I was like,
Yeah,
"Whoa, is it working? Are they like swaying Apocalypse?" And I think they could have if Apocalypse didn't come in and see all the tech that they were doing and stuff, but that
that's true.
that would have
Yeah.
been. But I wonder, like, what is Marvel trying to say in this show about time travel, and how does that differ than Marvel in the main MCU? Because we
Hmm.
see with Pharaoh Ramatut that he's got the Kang technology. It looks like Ant-Man, what is it, Quantumania? It looks like
Yeah.
Quantumania. It looks like Loki a little bit. So it's like, what, is it? Yeah, I don't know.
What are they doing? Yeah, let's go right to that because what I'm like when I saw that I was like, oh okay, because they're not going to use Jonathan Majors, so let's like we'll just give them Kang then. Do you think
Right.
they're gonna go full Kang with this? I don't mind it. I mean, they could throw a freaking wild. I remember from the first season when we were watching X-Men the first season, and
Yeah.
it was like I can't believe how many big stories they're going through so fast.
Right.
I didn't expect them to end on Bastion. I could see this thing ending on Kang and being like, yeah, I didn't see that coming, but that's that's how fast these things go.
Right.
That could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like, I feel like Apocalypse is too obvious to be the bad guy. Like, I feel like there is
Yeah,
going to be a secret bad guy. Uh, Kang is in. Why would? Yeah. Could they? I don't know. It's like, do they? How
they could,
much do
and they're
they want
setting
to?
up a rivalry that's existed from the beginning. So Kang has been
Right.
against, God, what's his actual old school name? It's Rama Tut. They're
Right.
setting up this
Yeah.
rivalry between Apocalypse and Rama Tut from the
Mhm.
beginning, and like, yeah, those two characters kind of play out there all through time, so it could really work out kind of well, where they're
Yeah.
constantly hitting each other. It's just weird because it's like or Kang as a X-Men villain feels weird to me, but
It's true.
works.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I just wonder how much they're trying to get away from the Jonathan Majors king of it all. I know that he's been allegedly or unaccused or whatever the case may be, or not found
Yeah, yeah.
guilty. But yeah, it feels like an interesting, but also this to me, especially the beginning of episode 3, feels like this was written when Jonathan Majors was still very much a part of the MCU,
Oh, that's
right?
a
Like,
great point.
they say that this other guy wrote it, but, like, we know the drama behind the scenes with Bo DeMayo,
Yeah.
and I
His
think
name's
Bo
still in the credits
DeMayo.
and all that too, so it's like, yeah, they can't get rid of him completely on this. He definitely had input.
Exactly, he still got that executive producer credit, so I'm pretty sure this was written with the yeah, with the Jonathan Majors still in the mainline MCU. I do love the tie-ins, though. We got the Watcher last season in the episode
Mhm.
5, remember it? But I also yeah, I think with Kang, this is just showing, there's some connections here, and I think this also allows the mainline MCU, if any of these characters can get pulled from the animated series into something
Yeah.
like Secret Wars, they're gonna do it.
Oh my god, make it happen somehow, make that happen. That would be so freaking cool. You see
Yeah.
this storm, oh my
Mhm.
god, that'd be so sick against
Yeah.
Doom. Damn, that'd be sick.
I know.
Uh, some of the other things going on in this episode, we have who do we have? Oh, so no, that's I'm sorry. I keep getting the storm one from the old one. My bad. Um, but we have Xavier who's trying to counsel Magneto against this. Is there a better way for Xavier to handle this? I kind of felt like Xavier was very passive in this episode when normally he wouldn't.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So admittedly, this was my least favorite episode, which
Oh,
was
okay.
interesting when you say your favorite. Which is awesome. I could see why it would be your favorite, but yeah, I think because of, I'm like, has Xavier not learned anything now? Like, have you not
Yeah.
learned that you just gotta start making things happen? You can mind control most of these people, and I know he has his boundaries, but he crosses the boundaries all the time in the comics.
Of
He probably
course.
did it
Yeah.
in the original series too. So I'm like,
Yeah.
why are you not trying to influence things a little bit more? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. I thought that like it was really a reversal on the actions. Like I felt like Magneto was trying to actively help. It might not have been, but then Xavier was working against it. I was like, you guys should be opposite. I felt like that was something wrong there a bit. There
Mhm,
was a mention to Eternal Shores. I thought might have been a bit of a deep cut for Celestials, which is like,
mhm.
okay, that goes back to Apocalypse. Could they bring that into X-Men 97? Because that seems like it's really deep cut.
Yeah. I think they could. I mean, the ship that they showed, I wasn't familiar with it. Was it an Eternal ship? Was it a Apocalypse
Yeah.
ship? Like, I didn't know the ship that they were referencing.
I thought maybe it was a piece of like the Inhumans. God, I can't even
Oh,
remember where, but I thought it was maybe a piece of their thing where it was like,
mhm.
okay, that looks like maybe it's like forever up, stuff like that. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that could make sense too. Yeah, I just found it being like, all right. I guess my issue was I knew Apocalypse was always going to get to the point where, for some reason, he was going to be like, "Screw you guys," and I guess I
Yeah.
was just kind of waiting for it. And so the whole Magneto thinking he was going to turn him for me never felt like that was actually going to stick, and it doesn't. And then it's like, okay, so he's back to being a bad guy, and It's going to lead him on the path that we knew he was going to get on. But maybe that's the point. Maybe it's like a Twilight Zone where, you start or you end right where you began, And so,
Well,
yeah,
I'll give
I
you
don't
some
know.
Twilight Zone on that. What if it was Apocalypse would never have gotten to where he is if it wasn't for the coaching from Magneto to make him a better leader and the betrayal that
Mm,
told him to embrace anger. So like I always like to look at like, oh, so the X-Men created Apocalypse in that way. Outside of that, he would have
right.
always been just small time, but now he's a leader because of the influence the X-Men put on him. That's why he's the
Yeah.
biggest villain.
That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this comes from comic books or not, but I always felt like the X-Men were the reason why Apocalypse existed. Not in the fact that he was born with powers, but in the fact that
Right.
he was as evil as he was because they showed him something he didn't want to admit. I mean, it goes so far even as House and Powers of X. What was this? Like it's X of Swords, and then whatever is after that, where it's Apocalypse's love and like his kids come back from the other island. And it's funny in that family, he's the soft one. But I always felt like, you know, he hated them because he's like, you guys have all this power, and yet all you want to do is just go be neighbors with the, Susans or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you should conquer them. You should be you've all the power in the world, and yet you're like, we should just be friends. And so I don't know. I guess it was, but again, this is me talking as somebody who's read this comic for years and years and years, where I think if you were a new person to the show, I guess that would be surprising.
Well, see, and I am new to a lot of this story, and I
Mhm.
will throw this out there: the idea that he wants to conquer everybody instead of being neighborly with him, I think it comes back to the fact that he was a slave. So then he sees like, well,
Right.
if you're not their master, they're your master. So he doesn't know that equal balance thing because that doesn't exist for him. So like, I thought this kind of
Right.
gave him a lot more purpose going forward, and like how this would eventually snowball into being Apocalypse at the end. Because what is Apocalypse in the future that we saw in the first episode if he's not the Egyptian Rama Tut that was ruling over the slaves that he had? You know what I'm saying? He became what he
Very
hated.
true.
So, just it took 6,000 years to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true though. You're so right. And that does tie in perfectly with the other side that we see this in the future. So I think on that side, this show does such a beautiful job of like mirroring things. Like last season
Yeah.
did it too with like different relationship triangles to different metaphors on society and love and all these things. And it's like I think it does it here as well. It's pretty well done. When you put it that way, I'm like,
That's one
man,
of the
this
things
is
I think
good.
X-Men does better than any other comic book, Marvel, DC, anything like that, is really make you question the morals. And like it goes back. I
Mhm.
mean, one of the classics is like, would you take the cure if you were a mutant?
Right.
And like, there's so many times like, what is the morals of like, is Magneto right or is Xavier right? That's one of the oldest ones, right? And I thought
Mhm.
each one of these episodes did a really good job of like delivering a moral that I could seriously see going either way with. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I would probably side with Cable because that makes things happen, and Jubilee's way or Xavier's way is just not going to work. Or yeah, you know what? Go raise your kid. Be happy in a messed up future. Who cares what
Right.
happens? It's already messed up. It can't get worse. So like there's
Yeah,
all kinds of
yeah.
things like that where it's just like I love that the show does it, that X-Men in general do it. It's really
Yeah. So true. So true. It's like these amazing situations. It would be hard to do in other scenarios. It again, which brings me to how is this whole Avengers Doomsday gonna work? Because
yeah.
that's an Avengers movie, but I don't think you do time travel or like almost Back to the Future stories better than the X-Men universe. So
Oh yeah.
it'd be
I
interesting.
mean, Days of Future Past is one of their biggest, best stories, and it's all time travel-y. Matter of that,
Right.
the audiobook for that, I think I've read. Yeah, it was the audiobook. Fantastic, by the way, guys. If you want to check out that audiobook, it's really good.
Nice.
All right, I think that is basically it. I had a lot of fun with these 3 episodes. We're gonna review every episode. Might not be immediately, but we're gonna review every episode as they go on our YouTube channel, guys. So join us there. It should be a real big blast. Today, I'm joined by Bill Bernhardt, the author of the Superman Wars. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing very good. I love that you're wearing the full Superman merch. You're totally ready for this conversation.
That's
You wrote
absolutely.
a
I've written a lot of books, but this is the first time
Yeah.
I've had a chance to dress up. So I'm
Yes,
going
that's a
for
good
it.
point. You've written over 60 books, which is pretty wild, mostly fiction. And in this one, you're going with this sort of narrative nonfiction.
Yeah.
How was it trying to embrace that new writing format?
You mean, how was it shifting to that? Really challenging.
Yes, shifting to
and
it. Yeah.
I had to do like several iterations of chapter one before no, that's not quite right. So anyway, I decided it was Jerry Siegel's story and I was going to write from his viewpoint, which meant I need to know everything there ever was to know about Jerry. But here's the cool thing. I found that I could relate being a writer, not that I created Superman or anything, but I could relate to a lot that sort of, early desire to publish your work, to write and send it out there and then get it published. And, so anyway, so I told the story from his viewpoint and it's sort of some of the same narrative techniques you'd use in a novel, but not big, without the luxury of just making stuff up when you want to.
Well, luckily, it's tough to say because the middle part is pretty sad for Jerry. But Jerry's had a very interesting life, and the story is very interesting. So
Yeah.
there is something there where you have a lot to pull from. And I know that you had quite a bit of interviews, even with Jerry's family.
Yeah.
Were there anybody in particular you interviewed that really felt very interesting to you?
This is like saying which of your children do you like better, because there's not going to be
Yeah.
a good answer. But I tell you something that happened early on. I was at a conference. I host a writers' conference every fall called WriterCon, and I
Right.
was talking to this agent about this Superman book that I wanted to do, and she said, "Well, would you like to talk to Paul Levitz? I went to grade school with him." And Paul Levitz, of course, is a great comic writer and past president of DC. So yeah, I took that and had a really nice chat with Paul, who I really liked a lot. But for that matter, I got to talk to Elliot S. Maggin, who was my favorite Superman writer when I was a kid. So that was fun too.
You started off, I actually watched your podcast actually talking about your own book. And you had mentioned
Right.
that, one of your earliest memories.
Only once. I don't do that every week.
But you talk about how your earliest memory with Superman is with the animated New Adventures of
Yes.
Superman.
Mhm.
What about that really you think kind of hooked you as a young kid? And how has your opinion on Superman evolved over the years?
Who knows why those
Right.
1966 Filmation cartoons caught my fancy. I mean, they're terrible by any objective standard. They're unwatchable when you're an adult, but they worked fine for this 6-year-old. I think I love the idea of this guy who could, he can do anything. He could take over if he wanted to, but he doesn't. He just sort of helps
Right.
people, and that's not even like his main thing. Mostly he just hangs out as the meek, mild-mannered reporter, kind of low level, and then occasionally helps people, doesn't want anything, doesn't expect anything. That just seemed like a cool kind of guy to be. I think that's part of the appeal even today with Superman. He just, seems like the best, not probably what we would get in real life, but the best dream of what somebody with those kinds of
Right.
powers would be like.
Yeah, the hope. And I just find it very interesting because I know, those ones were pretty good. Well, I mean, in comparison. But like I grew up in the 90s with the 90s Superman, and that was what got me into the comics as well.
Mm.
And for some reason, I feel like, oh, that still holds up. It has to. But it's not like I've gone back and revisited them. So I'm wondering with you going back and revisiting them,
Yeah.
your appreciation
I-
of Superman has to
I-
evolve over time.
Yeah, I like the 90s series too. That's the Superman, the animated series or something like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
I watched those with my kids. I've seen them since, for that matter. I like those. They had some good writing on some of those.
When you look, I haven't gone back to watch those in the recent years, but I
Yeah.
would presume that now, as somebody who reads Superman, looking back at those, I would see some of the flaws or some like hollowness that was pushed
Sure.
towards kids. And as an adult now, I would see like, well, there's some nuance there that he's doing. How much is
Mhm.
Clark Kent, the main character or not? There's some stuff there. And I think somebody who like you, who has really dived into the history of Superman, will
Yeah,
probably experience that more than most.
right. Well, that's what Jerry Siegel wanted, of course, from the very start when he's a teenager and comes up with the idea for this character. And it goes through several iterations. That's all covered in the book. But
Mhm.
the point is he created this guy to deal with our problems, not Flash Gordon goes somewhere else to Mongo to fix their problems, but Superman came here and he was dealing with the problems of that era, the Depression and a looming war and World War, that's going to be World War II and massive prejudice. And in that very first story in Action Comics #1, Jerry writes that Superman is the champion of the weak and oppressed. And I
Yeah.
think that's what he was to Jerry. He was an FDR New Deal superhero. But I think that, it was the right idea at the right time. And I think that's why Superman took off really from the second it hit the stands. I think this idea of this champion of the weak and oppressed had a lot of appeal in the tough times of 1938.
Yeah. And in your book, you're describing Jerry. He comes off a lot like he's shy, bullied, a little bit relentless in his efforts to get what he
Very.
needs.
But that's
Yeah,
why we're talking about him here.
exactly.
So.
Yeah, but do you feel like that's something that he imparts in Superman anyway, or is that more like maybe he puts that into Clark Kent? You think that's in there?
Well, I think he is the model of Clark Kent. I think, I know there are other theories. Some people said Harold Lloyd. Somebody said Walter Dennis. Look, it's Jerry. It's a
Yeah.
taller, slender Jerry, but it's Jerry, even down to the coin eyeglasses and the shy, stuttering, feigned, of course, cowardice, especially around women. That's completely Jerry's personality, and that's where that came from. That's what he put in. Superman is probably what he wished women would see inside him, 'Cause in the comics, it really is kind of a love triangle where one guy is on two sides of it, depending on what clothes he's wearing at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think to Jerry, it was like a Cinderella story. Cinderella is, really special, but nobody appreciates her until finally somebody does at the end. And it's the same thing here. She thinks I'm a spineless, cowardly, worthless guy, but I'm really the world's strongest superhero. But I'll just keep that to myself for some
Well,
reason.
I know. Sometimes you're like, come on, shout it out, man. Uh, the book is mostly told through Jerry, of course, but you can't say Jerry without Joe. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people don't give Joe Shuster enough credit for inking,
Hmm.
one of history's most important characters. What do you think people often get wrong about Joe Shuster in this story?
Well, they may not appreciate how good his art was because by contemporary standards, you could make fun of it like you could any illustrated art of that era. But I think it was
Mhm.
perfect for Superman. I think it looked different. It had its own distinctive Joe only look to it. And
Yeah.
I also think it seemed accessible to young people. Like, this doesn't look like mom and dad's Norman Rockwell stuff. This is ours. This is something maybe I could draw. And you're right. I don't think people give him enough credit for him, and I don't think they realize what how shy he was. He really was the antithesis of Jerry, who was kind of shy himself, but he could make himself push. He could push
Right.
himself out there and keep submitting things and trying and trying. Joe was much more gentle and frankly would never probably had a job in art at all had it not been for Jerry, who kept sending their work out and sending it out for years and years until finally Superman takes off.
Yeah. You needed Jerry's drive to make this
Yeah,
happen. The Jewish immigrant context runs through your entire book, and
right.
it runs through the story of Superman, the building of Superman. How do you think that shapes Superman's story, Jerry's story, overall? Like, how should we be looking at it through a modern lens as well?
Well, there's no denying the almost totality of Jewish people in the founding of the comic books. As soon as it gets away
Yeah.
from Major Wheeler Nicholson, then it's, all the figures are probably Jewish. And I don't know if you read The Comic Book Heroes by Jules Pfeiffer, but in there he says, I'm not going to give this word for word, but what he basically says is, you know, they wouldn't have us in the newspaper strips. That was all, privileged white boy kind of enclaves, but comic books, this scruffy lower rent stuff that nobody respected, we could get jobs there, and they did. And I tried to bring out the point because it's so obvious that this pervades all of the comics industry. Did it pervade Superman? Sure. I mean, I'm not the first one to say that his origin story is basically Moses in outer space. His parents want to save him, so they put him in a basket and send him along, and he's adopted and becomes a great hero to his people. And that's a story Jerry would know. The cover of Superman #4, you remember it's Superman pulling down the pillars in the temple. Well, it's Samson, right out of the Bible. So, I don't think that influence can be denied at all.
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting because when we look at like Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, Harry, as you had revealed in the book, towards the end there, actually helped fund 1,200 Jewish refugees.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you put that in both those angles into one person who this entire time has such disdain for because he's the villain to Jerry, and it's like, no, he has this other side. Did you find any surprises like that with him?
That was so astounding. I wasn't even really sure how to present it. Should I put it in chronological order? And finally, what I decided? No, save it for the end. Let it slap everybody else in the face just like it did me. Because how can you hear somebody who is so ruthless in his business life, but obviously could be very generous, unbeknownst to about anybody in many other ways? I think in Harry's mind, and Jack Leibowitz's too, business was business. And that's why, they weren't going to give the authors or the artists the rights that they wanted. And they were going to start paying people more money because they were all interchangeable. They didn't feel like they were being mean or cruel or disrespectful to creators. They thought, this is good business. They say so in some of those bankruptcy papers when they're stealing the company from the major. And I think in their mind that, building the business, that's legit, but they can also have hearts of gold in other ways.
It's very interesting. One of the heartbreaking moments, of course, is early 50s. Jerry's very struggling. He has a new daughter, and he's starting to write these letters. You had talked about how on your show, how those letters kind of feel, I don't want to say unhinged, but maybe desperate. The letters of a desperate man. What was your take reading through those letters? Did you start to lose hope with Jerry, or were you hoping for something better?
It is just heartbreaking to read that stuff. Here's clearly someone who is in major pain and is lashing out in all the wrong ways, kind of his own worst enemy. And as I don't remember, but I probably said on the show, I think if this were happening today, his friends would say he's having a nervous breakdown, because I think that's what was happening. And what got him through it, of course, is Joanne, because by that time he's married to Joanne, the original model for Lois Lane. And she, in effect, becomes first and foremost his agent, and later Joe's agent as well. And good, because they both needed one. It was long overdue. But she did so much more in that autobiographical fragment I found that Jerry had dictated about 100 pages of or didn't dictate, but typed about 100 pages of an autobiography. He says in there that at this time he felt suicidal. And so, what happened? Well, Joanne's what happened. And I'm sure loving his daughter, who was born in 51 too. I don't think it's a coincidence that these letters break out in 51 either. He's got this new baby girl at home and he wants to do everything for her and he can't. And that's just tearing him apart, I think.
I think it's also hard when he starts to see the success of Superman, and then like with the creation of Superboy, which was like, that's not even on the table, guys. And so I think that there's this thing where it's just like, how am I struggling so much to just take care of my daughter when when you're seeing DC grow from specifically one major character is leading the charge? It's rough.
Yeah, Laura Siegel, his daughter, told me that because she was growing up in the 50s and the George Reeves series, there he is standing in front of the American flag, arms akimbo and looking tough. And she said when that would come on, her dad would just leave the room. He just couldn't, it was too painful. Here's his creation doing well, And yet, where's his credit? Not there, because, as you know, in retaliation for filing the lawsuit in 1947, the company first fired him and then removed his credits from everything, which, we could argue about the legalities of how they acquired Superman, but taking somebody's name off their work, that's immoral. That's just
During the reprints,
wrong.
they would remove him and Joe, correct?
Yes.
Off the reprints. Yeah.
Yes. Even we're printing material that had been there before. It's shameless and pointless.
Yeah.
How does that help the company? I don't get it. That just seems like spite to me.
Yeah. And very much not Superman. That's what kind of it throws me off. It's like you're writing stories, you're printing stories of heroes who would never do the things that you would do.
Right.
You're the Penguin. You're the Lex Luthor of the story. It's crazy. In 75, there's a little bit of reprieve. We have the I don't want to go over the entire book because people really need to check this out, of course. But right before Christopher Reeve movies coming up, do you think DC kind of had a situation where the crowds swell saying that there needs to be justice for the original creators? Do you think that's finally the breaking point that got DC to start working with them?
Oh, totally. They got major bad publicity out of this deal. And let me just say up front that if anybody listening remembers 75 when DC finally gave them tiny pensions, and you think, well, that's the end of the story. It's so not. There's 50 more years of conflict and stuff. But anyway, so the DC got horrible publicity out of that. And finally, by giving Jerry and Joe basically the same thing they paid their secretaries at that time, they got rid of a lot of bad publicity. But I think they were worried about it. And I don't, and guess what happens? Early the very next year, Jeanette Kahn is brought in to take over the company. And I think that's not in small part because of the bigwigs thought that deal had not been handled well at all.
Yeah. And please make sure you guys check out the book because it doesn't end with 75, 08, 2013, and even up into 2033, we have whether he's going to go public domain. Right. There's a lot to look into this story, so make sure you guys are reading the books as well. You are an advocate for writers with your writing convention, your work in the law. What are some of the things that you would give? What kind of advice would you give to a new writer so that they don't end up in Jerry's situation here?
Yeah, well, this is kind of a cautionary tale because although I would love to tell you that this kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore, it does. I mean, it takes different shapes and flavors, but the vultures are still out there, and you have got to protect yourself. We have vanity presses masquerading as the real deal. That's sometimes part of major publishing companies, but not the part you want to be in. And now we have AI slop email coming into my inbox every morning, and it all looks perfectly real because the thing scraped my books, and so it knows everything there is to say.
Scrape podcast, by the way, as well. I get those same emails, and it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, and sometimes just is this real? Is this a legit offer? I don't know. So at the conference that you mentioned, WriterCon, which is every Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City, when I open it, one of the things I emphasize is, hey, while you're here, meet people. Even though you're probably all introverts and you'd rather be at the library or something. Remember, this is your tribe. Everybody here feels the same way. But there'll come a time when you'll need a critique group, or you'll want a beta reader, or you'll just have a question about what's going on with this thing with the agent and what I read. And so it's good to have some people you can exchange ideas with, and so go to the classes and all that stuff, but meet people, because that's how you protect yourself. And do I need to put this in as a coda? Don't sign anything without getting an intelligent second opinion from someone, probably a lawyer, depending on what
real
it
intelligence.
is.
Don't add it to ChatGPT and ask a question. That doesn't help you at all.
Yeah, no, it sure doesn't.
I think as a little bit of a hopeful tone to that as well, I think we are in a place now where we have more writers than ever. Like right now, one of the biggest books in the world is Dungeon Crawler Carl, written by Matt Dinneman. Started off as almost a
Yes.
fan project, and
Hmm.
now it's taking over the internet. It's taking over my bookshelves for sure. And so I kind of think like, luckily, I think it's easier for authors to at least get out there. You just have to be safe
Yeah.
because the predators are out there too.
Yeah. You're ahead of me. I read the first one, but I got waylaid onto something else. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, it's so hard. I get distracted too easy. Superman is one of them. I get the trades, and oh boy, they distract me.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
wrap things up with some rapid fire questions if you're down for these,
Oh,
and
okay.
we'll focus on some Superman stuff. I think that'd be the best way to go. What is your favorite Superman story?
I'm going to assume you mean like a written story, like an
Preferably written story.
actual,
Hey, if
as
you're a big fan
opposed
of the
to
movies
a
too.
story about, you're not going to roll me wrong no matter what I do. My all-time favorite would be Must There Be a Superman by Elliot Magan, because I remember being, I think, 10 and reading that and saying,
Hmm.
wow, that's kind of profound actually. And then I'd read it
Yeah.
again and again. I thought that was, and then, as I said, I got to interview him later, and go get the WriterCon podcast, and you can hear him explain how he was sitting in the Batman versus Superman movie and hearing them recite his title, but did he get credit? No.
Yeah. That's one thing I will say with the 2025 Superman movie. Joe and Jerry are in the credits, and I was like, that
Yeah.
feels good. Feels good to see them there.
They're in
Great.
Supergirl too. I'm afraid not too many people are seeing it, but both
It's worth a
credits are
watch.
there.
Yeah.
I loved it, but anyway,
Yeah.
there's Jerry and Joe at the beginning, and at the end they have the by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family credit,
That's great. That's
which I
wonderful.
guess they get for all super stuff now, because Jerry, of course, did not create Supergirl, although he wrote a ton of her stories, but
Yeah.
the first Supergirl story was Otto Bender,
Mm.
probably
The
on a
the
Mort Weisinger idea. Mhm.
the movie is based off of a Tom King book, guys, and I'm a
Yeah,
preacher for that
great
book.
book.
Please read Woman of
Me
Tomorrow.
too.
The art is fantastic. Everything about it's so good. So please read that.
Did you notice there was a planet Bilky in the movie? That's the artist's name.
I did not notice that. Oh goodness.
I gave you an
The
Easter
rewatch.
egg. All right.
There we go. That's a good catch. That is a great catch. Uh, it's funny that you mentioned like the 10-year-old. For me, my favorite Superman story, which when you tell other people, it's like, really? It's The Wedding of Superman from the 90s. That's the
Hmm,
first comic book I picked up, and just I remember opening the pages and seeing
really?
how Batman and the other superheroes are going to protect Metropolis while he gets married, and it's a wedding story. Why would a little boy like that? But man, it just opened me up to this world of superheroes, and I love it.
Right
It's on
story
the.
at the
It's actually
right
on my
time.
wall. Yeah.
Cool.
Who do you think is your favorite? I won't say the best.
Mhm.
Favorite on-screen Superman.
That is kind of impossible because, one, I like them all, and for another, deservedly, the world loves Christopher Reeve. So,
Yeah.
so dare I say anything else? I love the Christopher Reeve movies, even the lessers, but to me, even as a comic snob, I could object to some of what went on in the first movie. But man, he looked like a Kurt Swan drawing of Superman had just walked in front of the camera. That was just
Yeah.
perfect. I gotta say though, I love David Cornsweet's portrayal of Superman. I think he gets the kind of uh, doofusy boy from Kansas who just wants to help people and doesn't understand why people make it so hard. I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty insightful.
He seems so earnest too. That version
Yeah.
of Superman, in a way that almost isn't
And
allowed anymore in movies.
yeah, and not so much that it starts to be parody, which I think
Yeah.
is probably a tricky balance.
Yeah. Christopher Reeve. One of my favorite scenes is when he is Clark Kent and he's thinking about telling Lois, and so you see him kind
Hmm.
of like perk up, like you almost see him shift into Superman without the suit coming off, and then he sinks back into, and it's like what a performance to be able to show you two different characters and
Yeah.
not change a bit of the clothing. Amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I love that scene.
Here's my last one for you.
Okay.
One Superman myth that you feel like they should be getting rid of. Maybe the idea that kryptonite's his weakness, that he needs the sun? Is there anything that you feel like is getting overused and they should stop using so much in the Superman stories?
There's probably a good answer to this. I mean, everybody knows kryptonite is overused. Lex is overused, but everybody loves it, so who cares what? I'm gonna have to go with the different suns, and the color of the sun deciding everything,
Yeah.
which is really confusing me at this point. but Jerry Siegel didn't invent that. It was later authors who got on board with the power of the suns and the Superman as a solar battery, basically, kind of idea. But so we've got yellow suns. Kryptonians are powerful. Red suns, they're not. But in the comics, I think green suns, they're not too. So what's the difference? In the Supergirl movie, of course, the green sun is poisonous. And I'm like, oh, I don't remember that. But I think that was in the book, actually, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So that was probably the introduction in comics.
Jarring. Yeah. Actually, that's probably a good point, which is quite recent. Then that's pretty amazing. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think for myself too. I think probably the sun is getting a little overused, but there's nothing better than that moment when a Superman or Supergirl reaches towards space, gets hit with that sun, and recharges. Takes you right back to being a kid. So it's like, don't get rid of that. That takes me right back. You got to keep that in there.
That's fun.
So, Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show. Can you tell everybody where they can get your book right now? And,
sure.
And I'll make sure all the links are in the description too.
It's called The Superman Wars. Well, The Superman Wars, a battle for truth, justice, and an American icon. And you should be able to get it about anywhere, I would think, in your local bookstore. If they don't have it, you should complain bitterly and tell them to order it. I know you can get it at all the online bookstores because, like every other egocentric author, I reload my Amazon page all during the day so I can see if my ranking's gone up half a point or something. But anyway, so it seems to be doing all right there.
Yeah, and please make sure you guys check it out. Yes, you can go to your local bookstore and usually ask them to. I actually have Absolute Batman coming in for that exact thing. That is a really good way to do it. All the links will be in the description. I'll also include WinterCon, the podcast. WinterCon, writer, that's my bad handwriting.
I know what you meant.
On that. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's fun.
All right, that's our interview with Bill, all about the Superman Wars. Again, link in the description if you guys want to check that book out for yourself. I highly recommend it. I had a real blast. I really like the idea of history told narratively like that. And Bill, as you know, as you heard, very knowledgeable. And then as a reminder, we're going to be talking X-Men every week over on our YouTube channel. A couple more things I want to remind you about. I have a vacation coming up. Whoop, can't wait. That's going to be starting on the 20th of this month. So we're going to have some episodes coming out while I'm gone, but they won't necessarily be like fresh content. So keep that in mind. And then as for our network, what's going on over there, for Distance Nerding, they have an episode that just came out about Spider-Man, kind of talking about the new movie coming up, Grey Hulk, the reveal that Austin Powers 4 is a go, and the fact that Thundercats is possibly returning. And then Fandom Portals just did a big episode on Masters of the Universe, the new movie, the 2026 version of that. And I'm actually going to be guesting on that podcast here pretty soon, so make sure you tune in for my episode as well. We have one more podcast that's coming up in the hopper, and the brand new show is coming up, and we have some really cool stuff coming up down the pipeline I'm pretty hyped about. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Shout out to our Patreon. We're going to be working on something special for you guys starting in August. There's a new show coming to just Patreon alone that I hope you enjoy. It's going to be a bit of an experiment. I'm a little worried about it, but I think it's going to be fun. And I just really appreciate all the listens. All right, everybody, have yourself a fantastic week. Bye.